everyone. I welcome you to the first webinar of the second week of International Yoga Conference, USA 2021, organized by American Academy of Yoga and Meditation. This conference is a virtual month-long celebration to mark International Yoga Day, where we bring you webinars, yoga sessions, spiritual discourses, and workshops spread over 4 weekends, and each led by an expert in that respective field. For our new viewers who are joining us for the first time, I take this opportunity to introduce you to the American Academy of Yoga and Meditation. The American Academy of Yoga and Meditation, or as we know, AAYM, is a non-profit organization for physicians, researchers, medical professionals, and practitioners of yoga and meditation. The organization is dedicated to education and research in the field of yoga and meditation by fostering an interdisciplinary approach that links together science, art, ethics, and spirituality to improve human life. Stress is a common word we use nowadays. But did you know that the term stress was coined for the first time in 1920s by a famous endocrinologist, Hans Selye? He defined it as a non-specific response of the body for any demanding situation. We often experience this as faster heartbeat, faster breathing, sweating, or heightened alertness. This kind of short-term response of the body is beneficial and even needed for the body to face challenges on a daily basis. However, any long-standing stress can be harmful. Long-standing stress, also known as chronic stress, is one of the important risk factors for many conditions like heart problems, hypertension, diabetes, and even gastric problems. Research shows that the physical and the biochemical changes that happen in the body during such long standing stress are very similar to those that happen when a person starts to age. Thus, managing stress is not only vital for optimum health, but also to slow down that aging. The ancient practice of yoga, which is rooted in science and philosophy, has been proven as a powerful tool nowadays to manage stress. And maybe this could be a secret to control or reverse our aging. Join us this interesting webinar, Effect of Yoga in Stress and Aging, where our eminent speakers will present their views, share latest developments in the field, and will answer your questions at the end of the session. It is now my honor to invite the moderator of today's webinar, Dr. Akshay Anand. Dr. Akshay Anand works as a professor at Neuroscience Research Lab in Department of Neurology and is a professor in charge at CCRYN Center for Mind-Body Medicine by Yoga Intervention in Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research at Chandigarh. He is an adjunct professor at the Department of Philosophy at Punjab University, editor-in-chief of Annals of Neurosciences and Integrative Medicine Case Reports. He is a former editor-in-chief of Integrative Medicine International. He has more than 200 publications in international peer-reviewed journals, including 28 policy research commentaries, and filed 4 patents. He has been awarded more than 12 national awards, including ICMR Amrut Modi Unichem Prize 2012 and QCI Award for his lab quality. Welcome, Dr. Akshay Anand. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shruti, and thanks to the American Academy of Yoga and Meditation, doing great job. And now as we are approaching the International Day of Yoga, that falls on the 21st June, and if I recall correctly, this is the 7th, started from 2015. And this is a series or marathon meetings that are geared up to understand the value of yoga from the neuroscientific perspective. And we have distinguished colleagues lined up from around the world, and we intend to deliberate on the yoga and its effect on stress and aging. Yoga, does it have any impact on stress? Does stress have impact on aging? That's very well known. Does yoga help alleviate stress? And does stress alleviation helps expand lifespan or increase lifespan? So this is what we are going to be discussing today. And this is, as my colleague Shruti mentioned, a non-profit organization, American Academy of Yoga and Meditation. And we'll be here with you for 1 hour and 15 minutes, 75 minutes. And that means that you can pose your questions. This is being streamed live in various YouTube channels, as well as Yoga Scholars PGMER program, run from Integrative Medicine Case Reports. So I'll start inviting 4 of my distinguished colleagues, starting from Dr. B.N. Gangadhar, a senior colleague and a friend, former professor and Director. Welcome, sir, of NIMHANS, one of the premier medical institutes focused on neuroscience and mental health in down south in Bangalore. He's now looking after the National Medical Commission, which just replaced the Medical Council of India. To the people out there in the globe who may have known more about Medical Council of India, for their knowledge, we have National Medical Commission that has taken over. The ethics and rating and medical assessment aspect is being looked after by him. I will give more detail of my colleagues, speakers, as I introduce them more formally. We also have with us other speakers like Dr. Rama Rao, who is an Ayurveda physician, a neuroscientist, joined us from California. He's the practitioner of yoga, and he's worked on both animal models as well as practicing yoga and practicing Ayurveda. Welcome, Dr. Rama Rao. We were here before in the same platform, and we hope to hear of more updates from your talk. And we have with us Dr. Ante Pajan. Dr. Ante Pajan is a great friend, and if you have heard of International Brain Research Organization, welcome, Dr. Ante. He's joined from McGill, close to Montreal, I think Montreal itself. And he's been one of the shining figures, one of the philosophers, friends, and guide to not only me, but also IBRO, International Brain Research Organization. He's a pharmacist, he's a pharmacologist, he's also a musician trained in Zagreb, but I'll tell and introduce more formally later on. So let's get started with our business today and try to learn in what way stress and aging can be alleviated or addressed by the practice of yoga or exercise, and also music at the end by Ante's talk on music and stress. Unfortunately, even though we have a talk by Bala Subramaniam, who heads the Sadhguru Center of Consciousness at Harvard, he's today scrubbed as he's required in a OR or OT, as we call in India, an operation room. So he's sent his video on stress and cognition and yoga, and we'll play him as a penultimate talk. So we'll start with Dr. Gangadhar, followed by Dr. Rama Rao, and Dr. Bala's recorded talk, and then finally end with a beautiful talk by Dr. on music and stress. Let's try to put things together, try to understand the neuroscience. Basically, this talk is going to be pretty much around the understanding of brain in the kaleidoscope of yoga and meditation and music. I guess we will have some insight into the working of brain using molecular tools, neurophysiological tools, psychiatric or psychological tools, and from also the traditional perspective that Dr. Rama Rao will bring. So if I have the permission of Anjali and Shruti, we'll get started with Dr. Gangadhar. Dr. Gangadhar, as I mentioned right in the beginning, he was former professor and the director of NIMHANS. He's now heading he's the president of Medical Assessment and Rating Board of the new Avatar National Medical Commission. He's joined us from Delhi. As you may have noticed from my Facebook posts, I posted some beautiful pictures that he clicks, and I put some parrots and beautiful birds there. So that was an introduction for those who follow us on the Facebook. He's a great photographer, but he did his MBBS also back in 76, 78, and followed by his MD in psychiatry. And he even did a DSc in yoga from one of the largest yoga universities in the world called the S. Vyasa, also in Bangalore. He's also the recipient of a very prestigious civil award from the Indian government called the Padma Shri. And he's got many other awards, similar government awards won by Karnataka government. He focuses on yoga and meditation. Even though he's a psychiatrist, he has developed very passionately the field of yoga in the perspective of psychiatry, the practice of psychiatry. And to that effect, he started the Department of Integrative Medicine in Bangalore, probably, and to the best of my knowledge, the only institute that was brave and courageous enough to start the center well before COVID struck us. So it stuck to him well before COVID-19 came. The untreatability saw us in an unplanned and unaware. He had already started this center there, where the Ayurveda and the yoga practitioners and faculty work shoulder to shoulder with the physicians and scientists who are recruited there. So it's a big achievement, and a salute to him. Dr. Gangadhar, please join us. We welcome you. We look forward to listening to your thoughts and how you brought in the field and what do you have to say of yoga and stress, and will you talk of some molecular stuff or will it just be physiological and psychiatry related stuff? Will you also talk of I remember having heard you in the National Academy, the INSA meeting in Bangalore, where you talked of connectedness in yoga. I wish you talk a little bit about that also. I very keenly await listening to you and trying to connect your talk with the following one. Thank you and welcome again, Dr. Gangadhar.
Thank you, sir. At the outset, welcome to the great meeting. Congratulations to the AAYM for conceiving this international or a global academic activity on yoga. And it is even more important to comment on this, given that we are observing the 7th International Day of Yoga in just less than a week's time. Great event indeed, and I also congratulate Dr. Akshay Anand for having put in people together for this morning's academic event. Yoga has, of course, become very popular, has been used very consistently, very extensively, both for well-being in general population and for treating various disorders, may it be psychiatric illnesses or may it be other non-communicative disorder related conditions. One of the common things that people hear about yoga, what do you experience from yoga? I feel relief from stress. This has been a common answer by most people who have been practicing yoga. And in fact, yoga is an indispensable prescription whenever anyone is launching a stress relief package program. So yoga remains with an equivalence of relief to stress. And whenever we are talking of relief to stress, we are also talking of the stress biological effects, as was mentioned by the introduction at the start of this video program. Stress induces several physiological changes, and one among them is elevating our stress hormone called as cortisol. And in fact, cortisol elevation with stress has been very ubiquitous, and any method to bring it down would be of benefit. Again, several researchers with healthy subjects have demonstrated reductions in the cortisol levels following practice of yoga. And this is something that we wanted to examine whether it would translate to patient population as well. Amongst the many conditions to which yoga is prescribed in mental health is depression. Depression again is a very common disorder, and it perhaps going to rank third with respect to the disease burden that is induced by illnesses globally. And so any help to reduce depression by means of yoga would be welcome, and we of course have demonstrated that antidepressant effects of yoga are fairly convincing with practice of in depressive individuals. Depressed subjects, by virtue of chronic stress, have elevated levels of cortisol. Again, a fairly well replicated finding. And does yoga bring down these cortisol levels? Yes, it does, of course, bring down the cortisol levels. In depressed individuals, outpatient depressed subjects who have been practicing yoga. Antidepressants too bring it down, but I just want to highlight the issue that yoga, even when given as a monotherapy, brought down the levels of cortisol. Okay, why should we bring down the levels of cortisol? Cortisol, when it continues to remain very high for long numbers of days, it has an effect adverse effect on the brain. My gray matter shrinks. And in fact, there has been some observations from animal studies and from other studies that this effect may be related to the reduction of the brain repair mechanisms, which happen by a chemical called as the brain-derived neurotropic factor. And this brain-derived neurotropic factor is required for repairing our brains, and for some reason or other, it falls, it drops. And again, in patients with depression, the levels of brain-derived neurotropic factor is lower. And there has been some data elsewhere to show that increased levels of cortisol reduce the levels of the brain-derived neurotropic factor. In our work with depressed individuals, we also found that depressed individuals had low levels of brain-derived neurotropic factors compared to healthy subjects. You give them yoga either with medicines or alone, brain-derived neurotropic factor levels rose. And in fact, very interestingly, the rise occurred in those subjects who were able to lose cortisol following yoga. So it looks like there is a inverse relationship. Lowering the levels of cortisol facilitates, increases the level of the brain-derived neurotropic factor in depressed individuals. Sure, this could well be happening in other individuals who are practicing yoga for long numbers of days. There are corroborative data to show that long-term practitioners of yoga have retained cortical gray matter. The brain gray matter volumes are higher in individuals who have practiced yoga for long numbers of years. Again, observation from healthy subjects. Even in elderly individuals who have been practicing yoga, we were able to demonstrate at the end of 6 months of introduction of yoga in elderly subjects who have been affected with what we call as the mild cognitive impairment, supposedly a forerunner of dementia, the cortical gray matter in the hippocampus became larger in the 6-month period in the elderly subject. The average age of this group was 70 years. So reduction of stress, increase of brain repair mechanism, protection to the loss of gray matter in the brain with yoga have been some observations that we have been able to demonstrate. So what about in other phenomenon of yoga? I see one of the speakers is going to be talking about compassion. Whenever we talk of yoga, other than the stress relief effects, the common reportage of the experience of yoga is I feel connected. In fact, one of the engineering students in late teens, when I asked her, why are you attracted to yoga? She had a lot of photos of yogis, yoga postures, etc., etc. An average teenager, I would expect them to have a lot of other interests and not necessarily yoga. I asked her, why are you interested in yoga? No, I've been practicing yoga. I feel very connected. I feel well. I feel confident. I feel connected to my family, the yoga guru, the yoga people who are doing yoga with me. When I come out, I know people are all connected. I feel confident. I'm not alone, and I feel fearless. I feel well connected to the society. And you know, what she said. She said, "This is the way it is. The whole world is a family." It was not some yogi, Baba Ramdev or Sri Ravi Shankar or Sadhguru talking, but an average teenager who practiced yoga for last maybe 2-3 years got this experience. So this connectedness, it was something that attracted me, and we looked at data and we looked at patients who were practicing yoga. Connectedness is a phenomenon which will help us to emote well with people outside. And it also increases what we may call as social cognition. And the social cognition is lower in individuals with schizophrenia. And it is this group of subjects who are going through the therapy in yoga in our institute. We looked at what changes that yoga would produce in them with respect to this connectedness. One of the hormones that will help you to feel connected, the cuddling hormone, is oxytocin. Recently, we have seen with the COVID having occurred worldwide, people are stressed and people are hugging cattle, hugging cow to feel well. And this feeling well, feeling connected is facilitated by oxytocin. Yoga in schizophrenia elevates the levels of oxytocin. Correspondingly, it also brings down, actually improves the scores of social cognition. So this connectedness has a very interesting observation. Yoga means to connect my personal consciousness with the cosmic consciousness. While that is a spiritual journey, while I'm doing so, I should also start getting connected with neighboring consciousness. And in fact, it is demonstrated by way of our improving the social connectedness, social proactiveness, social cognition as what we measure by psychological tests. Connection in ourself, in behavior, and also in my neuronal connections. One of the connected system in my brain is called as the default mode network, and its connectivity improves following yoga. So yoga does produce several changes in our biology, improves psychological state, and together that prompted us to develop what we call as the Integrative Medicine Center at NIMHANS, which Dr. Akshay Anand alluded to, where for the first time in the country, we have the yoga, Ayurveda specialists working on patients with psychiatric and neurological illnesses in one banner along with the allopathic modern medicine team. And we hope that this combined effort of integrative medicine would bring more positive outcome in our psychiatric and neurological patients. Thank you for inviting me to be on this show. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Dr. Gangadhar, and it was really a pleasure listening to you once again. So inspiring, and especially your talk of this center. And I often remember, and for the information of the reviewers, when Dr. Gangadhar speaks of integrative medicine, he also cautions that it shouldn't become another branch of medicine. As you can see, he narrated a lot of molecular and scientific outcomes of yoga practice, such as you mentioned the gray matter, increase in the gray matter, and increase in BDNF levels, which protects the brain, and also told us about the inverse relationship between cortisol and BDNF. And we cannot forget hearing you about the other neurohormone oxytocin, which makes us connected to others and also crave for physical bondings, also among our relatives and friends, and that's so beautiful. And it seems like from what you said, that the practice of yoga does have bring change at the brain, at the molecular level, which is so important for understanding more details of the way yoga brings wellness and health and wellness, and it keeps us free from disease or prevents us from different diseases. So, in my opinion, your assertion that integrative medicine, as you rolled out in NIMHANS, should be more of a actual integration and not just as a branch of medicine. Am I correct, Dr. Gangadhar? Is this?
Yeah, medicine, in fact, it is an integrated medicine application.
Great. Great. So what we will do, Dr. Gangadhar, is to switch to the other speaker. I do not see any questions at the moment. We will take all the questions at the end, and maybe questions from our fellow speakers also. So thank you once again. Please stay with us as we welcome Dr. Rama Rao from California, and I will introduce him to you. Dr. Ram holds a PhD in neuroscience and is an associate professor of neuroscience and principal scientist at Apollo Hospitals, USA. He has been known to work in age-associated neurodegenerative disorders, especially Alzheimer's disease. And I posted some of his pictures also on the Facebook with some beautiful postures that he was seen in, as well as in meditative pose. And I wanted the speakers to be introduced in action rather than in very, very tall narration of their CVs and stuff like that. So it also in one way reflects your own practice of yoga and your own personality. You are also a board certified Ayurveda practitioner and a registered yoga teacher. So, which is rare, coming from scientific background and also practicing not only yoga but also practicing Ayurveda. So you bring in a new perspective to the field of being retaining your scientific zeal, which is, I believe, neuroscience and molecular biology, as well as understanding the same ancient science, yoga and Ayurveda, from the same perspective. You're also an author of a recently published best-selling book called The Good Living Practices. It is supposed to be one of the very good book on Ayurveda, yoga, and modern science for achieving optimal health, happiness, and longevity. And talking of longevity, everyone wants to live long, but not just live long, but also a quality life. So, is it possible to reverse the biological clock? And is it possible to do that by optimal yoga practices? What Dr. Gangadhar said from his experience, as well as about 400 publications and about 60 MDs he produced. Have you brought that to practice? Is there any yogic technique that you might consider telling us about which can bring in longevity? And is it useful for COVID-19 related stress? So with all those questions on behalf of the viewers all around the world, I welcome you to tell us, apprise us of what you know in the field and where are we headed, and then we'll take some questions at the end. Welcome, Dr. Ramarao.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anand. Good morning to folks in India, and good evening to all the folks here in this country, USA. Thanks again, Dr. Anand, for the wonderful introduction. And thanks to American Academy of Yoga and Meditation for providing this platform. And of course, to all the volunteers who made this possible. So as Dr. Anand mentioned, my topic is about the role of yoga for optimal aging, which I also refer to as rewinding the biological clock. So let me go ahead and start sharing the slides here. I hope you can see the slides. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes, we can see the slides. Now they went off. Anjali, can you help with the slides again?
Now it should be there.
Yeah, it's coming up. This is there.
Okay.
You're good to go. You have 8 to 10 minutes. We are a bit short of time now. Please go ahead.
So when it comes to stress and aging, we need to understand a little bit about the aging phenomenon itself. All right. So there are two aspects of aging. The first is what we call chronological aging, as I put up here in this slide. Chronological aging actually refers to how old the person is. It's the most straightforward definition of aging. This aspect of aging is not in our control. It happens whether we like it or not. Okay, so seconds turn into minutes, you are aging. Minutes turn into hours, and days and nights, you are aging. Days and nights turn into months, you are aging. Months turn into 1 year, you're aged by 1 year, happy birthday. All right, notice that this is not in our control. On the other hand, there's another aspect of aging called biological or cellular aging. Biological or cellular aging is dynamic. It changes in response to our emotions, our mental state, and our physical activities. In short, the more balanced you are, there's delayed cellular and biological aging. The more stressed you are, there's rapid aging and biological decay. Now, interestingly, both yoga and Ayurveda describe stress and aging in terms of a concept called Trayas Trivida Kalpa, 3 causes of disease. And one of them actually pertains to today's discussion, which is called parinama. Parinama is also known as transformation. And transformation is changes seen in an individual with respect to aging. Now, both yoga and Ayurveda emphasize that parinama or transformation is more visible in an individual who is chronically stressed. The more stressed we are, there's rapid acceleration or transformation, parinama, resulting in structural and functional changes in the body brain and the mind, causing them to degenerate and decay. Now, as stress increases in an individual's life, physical and mental activity also increases. This also causes rapid biological aging. As important as the movement of the mind or the body, both are equally important. And the way body responds to the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we act, this is what we call the mind-body connection. Now, poor state of mind or the brain due to stress can weaken the body, making us more susceptible to diseases and illness. Chronic stress of any kind causes the mind to be rapidly active, distracted, and it ages faster. Similarly, the body also ages faster as we keep moving faster. Now, when the mind and the body are still, each minute can be examined and time appears to pass very slowly. That's when you see biological aging slowing down. Now, what are the stresses? Stresses can be both external and internal. External stresses could be work, relationship, finances, family, children, and the present pandemic, it's about job and layoffs and mortgages and all that. Internal stresses are mostly emotions that affect us physically and mentally. Now, in yoga and Ayurveda, there's a concept called Arishadvarga, the 6 enemies. These are nothing but the negative or emotional tendencies like kama, lust, krodha, anger, lobha, greed, mada, arrogance, moha, delusion, and matsarya, jealousy. Now, evidence-based studies clearly show that both external and internal stresses can result in rapid transformation, parinama. It lowers cellular immunity and it also triggers rapid biological aging. Now, in the aging field, we're always told to look at the candidate who occupies the White House to understand the stress levels and rapid aging. As you can see in this cartoon, this is a picture of Mr. Bill Clinton when he first occupied the White House in 1993. On the right-hand side, that's this photograph when he occupied the White House. On the right side is the same president 4 years later when he ran for the second term of presidency. I don't need to tell you, but you can see the obvious aging changes on him within a span of 4 years. Chronic stress has a profound effect on several health parameters that can result in accelerated aging and triggers age-associated conditions. Now, Rita Efros, Owen Wolkowitz, and others from the UCs and other places have clearly demonstrated that individuals with chronic stress have a higher incidence of various diseases of aging, such as dementia, cardiovascular, neurodegenerative conditions, cancer, psychological, as Dr. Gangadhar mentioned, and other mental issues, all of which contribute to accelerated tissue and cell damage. Now, interestingly, research studies also show that chronic stress can also cause defects in the fetus, especially during the first trimester of pregnancy, when the fetal and brain development occurs at a very fast rate. This can lead to premature aging of the fetus itself. The research studies were so alarming that Time actually came out with a cover article a few years ago. And of course, with my background in neuroscience as a neuroscientist, I'm also interested in knowing about chronic stress and its effects on the hippocampus and other cognitive areas of the brain, resulting in dementia and memory loss. So a million-dollar question is, what interventions are out there to combat stress in order to have optimal aging? Optimal aging is aging gracefully without any negative effects of health. This is also the definition of what we call health span. It's a part of a person's life during which they're generally in good health. The question is, how do we achieve maximum health span by overcoming stress naturally and slowing down biological aging? And the answer is yoga, meditation, and pranayama. Now, when we talk about yoga, let's not think about asanas alone, because the benefits from yoga comes not just asana alone, but involves all aspects of yoga philosophy. That is what we call the 8 limbs or the Ashtanga yoga. And of course, it also includes karma yoga or selfless service. Now, evidence-based studies clearly show that people who preach and practice non-violence, ahimsa, people who speak truth and lead a truthful life, satya, people who don't hoard material things or hoard negativity in their brains, aparigraha, people who preach and practice a non-stealing attitude, asteya. All these individuals experience inner peace, they have a better immunity, and they have optimal head span. These we know are the yamas. Furthermore, people who practice saucha, cleanliness, people who are very happy and contented, santosha, who lead a disciplined lifestyle, tapas, and who are constantly engaged in learning, swadhyaya. All these people do very good in terms of physical and mental health, and they also empower the society. These, as we know, are the niyamas. Now, scientific studies show that both niyamas and yamas sustain an individual's natural balance, and there is less transformation or parinam. It keeps the body at ease, the mind is at peace, immunity is strengthened, and biological aging slows down. Now, in addition, evidence-based studies from a number of groups clearly show that asanas, poses, pratyahara, regulating what we draw through the 5 sensory organs, breath practices, pranayama, and meditation, dharana and dhyana, focus and stillness, and karma yoga, selfless service, all these together reduce chronic stress, increase positive states of mind, and slows down biological aging. There's some wonderful work done by Elizabeth Blackburn at UCSF. She's also a Nobel Prize winner. Dr. Eliza Eppel, Drs. Brown and Gerbag, who have clearly shown that a combination of all these yogic practices strengthen the emotional, the mental, and the physical states. More specifically, these practices reduce inflammation, they improve heart health, they improve sleep, they improve immunity, flexibility, balance, respiration, which is very much required in the present state. They reduce all the emotional turbulence like fear, worry, anxiety, anger. They reduce chronic pain. They increase cognitive function. They lower the blood pressure. They alleviate PTSD. They reduce pain perception through the brain's pain receptors. They increase cerebral blood flow, which is very much required in patients with Alzheimer's like condition. And they improve the moods. All this happens through the release of hormones, including dopamine, endocannabinoids, oxytocin, and serotonin, which is a mood stabilizer, as Dr. Gangadhar mentioned. Now, the advantage with all these natural techniques is that the beneficial states are all sustained for a very long time. And the end result is a complete integration of the body, the mind, and the emotions, resulting in a stress-free and a disease-free life. And of course, cessation of biological or cellular aging. Now, unlike other interventions, the requirements for yoga are very minimal. Selfless service, very minimal. You need minimal space, you need minimal materials, you have to have only loose, comfortable clothing. You don't need to chant, you don't need to shave your head, you don't need to burn any incense, you don't need to wear orange-colored robes. All you need to do is cultivate focus, attention, awareness, intent, dedication, and be non-judgmental. I consider yoga, meditation, pranayama as the most natural and environmental friendly intervention. Notice that's the reason why these yogic practices are becoming mainstream. And in my opinion, I consider them as green therapies. The reason being that there's not a single pill or an operating procedure that can produce such immense benefits simultaneously at a system level. So if we all wish to look and feel good and we need to de-stress ourselves, we need to adopt yogic techniques in our own life. So thanks again for listening to my talk. You can learn more about yoga research and evidence-based studies in my recently published book. It's up here on the cartoon, Good Living Practices. And now let me stop here and either take your questions or participate in the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Ramarao, for a wonderful talk, very engaging. And you took Dr. Gangadhar's leads forward by endorsing similar effects of yoga even to fetus. You mentioned hippocampus, the seat of long-term memory and new memories, and apparently the volume of hippocampus also known to increase. But how it relates to aging? Are there any studies where yoga practitioners or meditators, apart from having a increased prefrontal cortex size, can have been found to live longer?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's not been done in humans apparently, but there are a lot of animal model studies where people have shown that it's extremely beneficial for people. I mean, for these in these animals where they have actually what they've done is they've simulated the yoga like conditions, and they've shown that these mice live for a very long period, very long time. They have high quality life in the sense that they do not have the typical diseases that animals do have in the cage, in the restricted environment. Not only that, there's some beautiful work done by Elizabeth Blackburn and Eliza Appel, where they have actually shown the levels of telomerase activity going up, and then the telomeres itself lengthening. And then, Dr. Gangadhar mentioned about BDNF. There are some beautiful studies to show that yoga meditation, especially meditation, people who practice meditation, what they have shown that the levels of BDNF goes very high. And what is very interesting is BDNF also goes high when you do physical exercise. It also goes high when you do a fasting, for prolonged fasting. So it appears as though BDNF seems to be a common factor for all these, what we call the beneficial interventions. And in all these cases, what happens is now you have simultaneous reduction in the oxidative stress. And then, of course, you have increased levels of endocannabinoids or increased levels of dopamine because of BDNF. And so all these factors, right, they lengthen the... Absolutely.
And most important is Elizabeth Blackburn's work, which showed that the main loci of telomerase, the telomerase is the real gene, is the real factor, which is found to be elongated. And
and those studies have been replicated, and it's really wonderful as to how they see the effects of meditation and breath practices on the length of telomeres. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a question you can just incubate with that question. We'll come back to you. We'll now move to the next speaker, Dr. Balachandra Subramaniam. He heads the Sadhguru Center of Consciousness at Harvard Medical School. That's Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Unfortunately, he's scrubbed now. He's in the OR, and so he sent a pre-recorded video for us. Dr. Balasubramaniam actually graduated from JIPMER, Pondicherry. Went on to did his SR-ship at Department of Anesthesia at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. Then he went on to get the faculty position at Harvard Medical School, where he is now a professor of anesthesia. And most importantly, he now has begun to include the contemplative practices as a means to improve the perioperative outcomes. So that's what's most fascinating. He's a humble and nice person who practices Isha Kriya. And I have the privilege of being on the scientific advisory board of that offshoot of our medical school, and it's a pleasure interacting with him. So may I request Anjali to play his video? In that particular talk, he is going to discuss the effect of yoga on cognition and stress and aging. So let's hear him out.
My name is Balachandra Subramaniam, and I'm a professor of anesthesiology at Harvard Medical School. I direct Sadhguru Center for a Conscious Planet at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk about stress and aging, specifically about cognition. I don't have any relevant disclosures to this presentation, but I'm supported by NIH and industry for research. I come from Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and this is the campus I work. Now, the way this presentation is going to work is we'll talk about cognition first, then we'll talk about memory, stress-free learning, yoga and brain changes, and successful aging. So let's just start with what happens to cognition in the aging brain. If we look at National Institute of Aging website, they talk about parts of the brain that are important to learning and other complex mental activities shrink. And communication between neurons may not be as effective. Blood flow to the brain may decrease, and inflammation, which occurs when the body responds to an injury, may increase even in the brain. The most important thing for us to recall is brain maintains the ability to change and adapt. It's not like the olden days where we always thought brain cannot change. Once the cell is dead, it's dead, and it cannot recover from an injury. That's not true. You can actually have the ability to change and adapt. And if you look at AARP, that is members over age of 50 years, the most important thing they want is mental sharpness. And so it is important for us to know how to increase our mental sharpness and how to make ourselves more cognitively fit. It's another thing that brain age can actually be measured. Now, what they use is they use EEG that is taken during sleep, and they measure the brain age. When you look at brain age, let's say chronological age is 50 years, the brain age should also be 50 years. However, in different disease conditions, what might happen is, for example, dementia, the largest bar that you see, their brain age will be much higher than the chronological age. Mild cognitive impairment, you might have this brain age almost 2 years more than the chronological age, and so on and so forth. All these yellow dots talk about how their brain age is above this dashed line, which is where it should have been. So it seems like this data that is coming from Brandon Westover's lab at Mass General Hospital basically tells us that brain age can be measured. And you can see that if a person is depressed, then the brain age is all over that map, and it can actually be more than what the chronological age is. This line is the brain age index. It just tells you that the gap keeps increasing with depression. So there's another term called cognitive superagers. They have a memory performance comparable to people 20 to 30 years younger. The question is, how can we be one of those cognitive superagers, right? So let's just focus on one aspect of cognition, that is memory, and how yoga and attention can improve this aspect of cognition. This, I acknowledge the presentation from Elizabeth Kensinger from Boston College, whose slides are displayed here in the next 2 or 3 slides. Now, there are phases of memory. So the first is information that strikes you from the world. The first thing is called perceptual memory. It's a very, very short term. It's about 1 second or so, and it's all because of the organs or the sensory regions that process this information. You have these eyeballs, the back of the eyeballs, there is retina. You have optic nerves that goes across, and here in the thalamus, that's called the visual area, comes to the visual cortex. And the visual cortex basically is occipital lobe, right, which is where the information is stored. And most of this is basically within this region, and so it is only 1 second memory, and that's a perceptual memory. Now, they undergo very little change with age. So you do not lose this perceptual memory, so you can actually process this information. But now the question is, how can we transfer this perceptual memory to short-term memory and long-term memory, right? So it's just a conceptual proposal. It's all about attention. So when you look at someone, you pay attention to that. Or when you look at a scenery, you just pay more attention without indiscriminate attention, right? So engaging in the moment. And single point focus meditation that is there in many, many schools of yoga, and in Isha Yoga, it's called Samyama. So it can potentially transfer this information, this perceptual memory, to short-term, long-term, and remote and semantic memories. So that is the concept. Now let's just move on to working memory. What is a working memory? Let's say that a person comes in a restaurant and takes your order. He'll remember it from the time he takes the order and gives it to someone else. That's a little longer than a second, but that's your working memory. And you also have something called processing speed, and that declines with age, right? So if you look at this MRI imaging, you basically see that brain age, or there's a loss of cortical information, and there's increase in the size of these cavities with older adults, right, with aging. Whereas in a younger person, you have this well preserved. This working memory is very reliant on the prefrontal cortex, which is in the purple color, right? There's also slowing of reaction time. There's something called simple associative task. There's, for example, oh, there's a red light, I need to stop. That is a simple associative task. But with aging, that process slows down. There's a complex choice task. Oh, there's an yellow light, what should I do? Should I cross or should I stop, right? And that also slows down with aging. And hard to switch between tasks. Okay, I'm engaged in something like writing a manuscript or something, and my research assistant comes and talks to me, I cannot stop. Hey, come back later. So that switching between tasks is not possible with aging as well. Now from perceptual short-term, let's move on to the long-term memory. The long-term memory, hippocampus is important. It shrinks with aging, so there are less cells that are available for storing this memory. And so there's overlap, and perhaps that can also impact your memory part. This is something called remote memory and semantic memory, right? In the semantic memory, there's no time and space information. Yeah, I learned something, but I know when I learned it. Whereas in remote memory, you also have that piece of information. And remote memory is dependent on the cortical regions. There is much higher levels of cerebral cortex, and semantic memory is in the temporal lobe. None of these is affected in the aging process. So you usually see these people, they have strong remote memory and semantic memory, right? So now let's just put together what is happening here. You have perceptual memory in the primary sensory regions of the vision. Then you have working memory, which is all frontal lobe. Long-term memory is in the hippocampus. Remote memory in the neocortical layers of the brain. And semantic memory is mostly in the temporal lobe. And organizing information, avoiding distraction, attending, rehearsing, and using associative strategies, all of those things are very helpful to move your memory from remote to working to long-term to remote memory, right? And this is basically what yoga and meditation is, providing you indiscriminate attention, reduction in the distraction, organizing your information much better, like a closet. You take your clothing and put it in a nice way so you can go back and pick it up later on. Similarly, memory can be organized really well. And then rehearsing that piece of information with the increased attention, you actually move this memory more into long-term memory states. So changes in the speed of neurotransmission is what they talk about as a key for slowing down, right? Potentially, this can also be preserved with yoga and meditation. Now let's just move on to stress-free learning and yoga and brain changes, because when there is stress, obviously there is inhibition of the cortex, and when there's inhibition of the cortex, there is a reduced learning. When the learning is not involved and it's full of distraction, of course your memory is going to be affected. Now, Sarah Lazar from Mass General Hospital in the Charlestown labs way back in 2005 actually showed that with continuous yoga and meditation, there is increased cortical thickness in insula, and there is a reduction in the amygdala, which is the center for emotions. So you don't have too much of emotions, negative emotions, which will inhibit your frontal cortex. And the EEG that is done in these people actually have alpha and theta that signifies increased attention and indexing states of relaxation. The key word here is relaxed alertness. You're alert, but you're also relaxed. That is the best way you can learn anything. And when you learn that way, your chances of remembering is much higher. So there's enough neurophysiological evidence from MRI and EEG as to how yoga and meditation can help to reduce stress as well as enhance learning. So it's all about connecting the dots, right? So there's pieces of information which is everywhere. Now, can I have a 30,000-foot view and connect these dots and actually have a better functioning of my brain? And because there's increased prefrontal cortical thickness, meaning there is more space that is available for storage and information, there's increased attention, relaxed alertness, organizing the information, processing the information, and finding out the meaning, self-relevance, etc., will obviously increase your ability to connect the dots. Now let's just focus a little bit on the stress. I'm only going to talk about the Isha Yoga part because that is what we have researched on, studied on. Inner Engineering Online, which is the flagship program of this particular foundation, when it is given to information technology workers. This is a wait-listed randomized controlled trial, which is a gold standard. If you look at the blue line, from baseline to 4 weeks, they got the intervention, whereas the red line is they are the control group now. There's a slight reduction in the perceived stress scale scores in the red line, but in the blue line, you see a big reduction in their stress scales just by taking 7 modules of Inner Engineering Online. Now, the red line at 4 weeks, these participants are now flipped over to the intervention, and the blue line stays on the same. So now the red, from week 4 to week 8, when they receive this intervention, they also show this significant reduction in the perceived stress scale. Now, when you look at the highest form of program that you can take as an outsider that is living in the society and taking the Isha School of Yoga is called Samyama. And with that, people with baseline depression and people with baseline anxiety, when they take this 7-day or 8-day retreat, they have almost 3 months of benefits, at least 3 months of benefits. We have not measured after that, where they have sufficiently reduced depression and anxiety because of these programs. And of course, they'll have a better functioning brain, better brain age, and of course have higher executive functions. For example, during the COVID times, we took about 7,500 people, of which 5,000 are regular Isha yoga practitioners and 2,500 are controls, same age, gender, and zip code matched. For almost 12 weeks, we followed these people. What we found, we actually divide them into 2 cohorts, that is those who have been regularly practicing yoga and those who do not practice yoga, and we randomized them and gave them one simple practice called Simakriya. And in the other group was we didn't give any activity for them. So what did we find? You see that majority of these people from Northeast, Texas, and California, and you also have participants from other areas, which is very much reflective of who practices yoga here. And you can see that over 12 weeks, the perceived stress scale scores were the lowest for regular yoga practitioners, whereas the well-being scale was the highest. So even during the pandemic, the worst challenge, you can see that these people have the lowest scores of stress and the highest well-being scales. So of course, well set for proper cognition and also less aging of the brain. Now let's go to the next level of brain function, which is the executive control network. And we used an MRI study for the same 7 to 8 day retreat in collaboration with Indiana University. What did we find? We asked them to do simple breathing and resting states and functional MRI with 3 Tesla machines. And you can see that people from baseline to after, at rest, as well as during the samyama breathing, there is a very significant increase in their executive motor network. And compared to the controls also they have. So pre and post in meditators, as well as comparison to the controls who did not do any meditation, you see a significant increase in this executive control networks. And you can see that yoga and meditation can reduce stress. It can actually enhance learning processes, reduction of the inhibition that is there and because of emotions in the prefrontal cortex is reduced. So you set them up for better brain aging, and so they should be really, their brain age index will not be too much, meaning their chronological age and the brain age should match, or even better will be their brain age will be much younger than the physical body's age. So now let's just talk about successful aging, right? Research suggests there are 6 critical elements. That is the McKnight Brain Research Institute talks about that. You should stay physically active, and you should manage your blood pressure, weight, and cholesterol levels, manage your risk for cardiovascular disease, talk with family members about any changes that they've noticed in your memory, and talk with doctor about your health conditions and make sure that you're taking care of all your health issues, staying socially and intellectually engaged, getting the recommended amount of sleep, and of course, daily yoga and meditation. So these will help you to not age too much and actually have even a younger brain age compared to your body. And aliveness need not go down with aging. So with that, I thank the opportunity and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bala, for a wonderful talk. And he talked of inner engineering, and because he's director of Sadhguru Center of Consciousness, there's a small scope, and people may agree and disagree among the yoga scholars, of whether to pursue the traditional literature and recommendations and endorsements for physical postures and kriyas and breathing techniques versus those that are coming up as new techniques. So Isha Kriya is one of those. As a scientist, as my personal opinion is, we should be open to new techniques, whether or not mentioned in the yogic scriptures, and test them and come up with new yoga protocols, whether they are useful for memory and cognition, as Bala alluded to, or for the risk reduction for diabetes or hypertension and other lifestyle disorders. So unfortunately, we cannot pose a live question to Bala because he's in the OR, but we have the list of questions here. We can pose it to him later. without much ado, we'll move to the next talk, which is a bit different and very exciting. I'm joined by my distinguished colleague, friend, philosopher, and guide, and one of the guiding lights to International Brain Research Organization, IBRO. Dr. Antipajan is trained as a musician, physician, pharmacologist at Zagreb. He's been trained in Geneva and is now in McGill. He retired there, but is still working at the Dean's office, active in research, and full of energy. Is now pursuing his passion, which he lived with while he was doing neuroscience, but is now coming out more openly with music. So his talk is going to revolve around stress and music, or music and stress. And he's joined to us. It's late night there. Thank you for staying awake. You mentioned that you become more and more awake as the night passes. So we look forward to listening to what you have to say. I posted your pictures in the Facebook with you holding your instruments of music, and was well appreciated. That was my style of putting or profiling our speakers in our Facebook, starting from Dr. Gangadhar's shooting of birds, and Dr. Ramarao's postures, and yourself with a violin. So over to you, Ante. I look forward to, and we all look forward to listening to your thoughts on music and stress. Over to you.
Thank you very much. The first step to show you my slides, if I ever reach that point. While I do that, let me first say that I feel very privileged to be with you guys, because you know things that I always wanted to know, but I don't. And that is the whole, shall we say, philosophy and tradition, Indian medicine. I had a very good friend who unfortunately passed away. He was graduate of Lucknow, Daya Varma, who has just published before he died, a book about kind of health and healing among different traditions. I haven't gotten to the end of this book, but what I believe I would try to say, and I'm very much, I apologize that we tried this before. I hope it will work. Can you see my slides?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay,
Please go ahead.
but you see wrong thing. So you see both forward slides and the one that I'm showing. In any case,
This is fine.
Is it fine?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So I put in a little bit about also aging, or better, Alzheimer, just to satisfy some of the requests that I heard at the beginning. I'm going to talk a little bit about nature of music, which is really important to recognize. Sorry?
Dr. Pajan?
Yes, please.
Sir, I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute. If you could put your slides in the slideshow mode. It's in the presenter mode, so in a big full screen mode.
Yes, I don't know how to do it, to be honest.
That's why I let him play it as it is, because it's late night
now?
and he may.
Yeah.
No, well, now that you're here, look at that symbol down right, below.
It's at the bottom corner. Yep.
Yes, I know what a slide show is, and I think I see it, but you don't see it.
Oh.
This is an eternal struggle with technology.
Yeah, that's why I wanted him to play as it was. Just go ahead, Trent.
Okay, I could do it just as is. Could I?
Yeah, these are minor things. We want to hear you out. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to say that what I'm going to talk today is, first of all, scandalously superficial and incomplete. That is unfortunately a measure of time. I'm going to say something about the music, nature of music in human existence, and touch issue of brain and music, and music as healing, and then I'll finish with music and stress. I would also like to say that one of my last slides would probably be justified to be here, because I'm trying to make a connection between what we see that yoga does and what music is. So, in short, music is, of course, a fundamentally human experience. Birds and whale songs are not music. It's ubiquitous across human cultures. It brings people together in a multitude of social situations. And it has many uses: enjoyment, social bonding, mood regulation, which we're going to touch, spiritual, religious, and ritual healing. We may have noticed that in the past, music was very much a mechanism to bring people together. Ever since the Walkman, when people started to bring their music to some secluded place, this balance has been changed, but I think we still have the same issue, meaning music is part of our life and it is one that we cannot live without. Now, that has a very important evolutionary connection, because all we know is that even 40,000 years, hominin, Neolithic site, for example, in China, which is one of the best preserved, we find evidence that people used musical instruments. It's a very interesting contrast between some modern cognitive scientists like Steve Pinker, who has been judging music as something that has no place in human evolution. He calls it cheesecake. Darwin by itself has had a very uncertain attitude, but he did say that there is a clear evidence that it could help select partner and therefore facilitate procreation of human. Unfortunately, the whole idea of gene as a very important thing has been changed in the last 20 years. You may have heard we now have something different from original Darwin or modern Darwin interpretation, because we recognize that genes by themselves do nothing. They're part of an organ that's called organelle, that is called genome. But that's another topic which I'm not going to go. It has its ramification. Major point is and that's an eternal question in human existence, what do we inherit, what we acquire? It's a completely wrong thing, because we cannot separate these things. We cannot separate nature and nurture. And in particular, now that we have this very important contribution from understanding of epigenetics, this whole thing is quite intertwined. So asking question, is music something that is only cultural, or is music something that's coming from our pre-wired system, is a mute question. However, I just want to remind you that we have evidence, and these are some of my Canadian colleagues who studied children of 6 months of age, who have produced evidence that children of 6 months without any musical education can recognize that intervals, consonance and dissonance interval, that the melody has changed. And therefore, there is something that indicates some kind of a pre-wired connection between us and music. Now, we already said that psychological function of music listening is something that we put together as regulation. Indicates that we regulate with music our arousal and mood. We achieve self-awareness, and it's also what we already mentioned, expression of social relatedness. There are some studies which I'm not going to go into which support this statement. Now, as far as the music and emotions are concerned, which is one very well recognized link, because we change our emotions by listening to different type of music. And it is indeed something very fascinating. There is a very interesting biological phenomenon that is associated with listening to music. My colleague up here in the Montreal Neurological Institute has studied dopamine release in the brain, and they found as a group of people in PET studies that music activates mesolimbic reward network, just like food, like drug and sex. Therefore, there is something very profound in the biology of humans that is linked with music. We also know that there are some physiological side effects of music, and that music training has a very particular importance on non-musical skills. In fact, one of the crucial things here is that studying on music contributes to overall development of child. Music also has a prophylactic, it's a prophylactic resource. In every culture, mother sings to child, and that is a crucial element of bonding and a crucial element of development. Plus, the motor behavior of children develops much faster if mother really not shake, but kind of dance with child, and that's clearly evident in some of the empirical studies. Okay, so let's go on and also go one step further to the role of music today. And I'm jumping over all these other things by saying that we recognize since antiquity, it was recognized that music has a healing power. And this is in modern times translated into music therapy, which is an empirical science. It has at least 10 different schools, which they are not necessarily talking about the same thing, but empirical studies are quite clear. And this is particularly so. I remember when I started my, in those days was neuropsychiatry. I was on the aging ward, and a friend of mine from music studies was also doing the same residency. And we had this group of patients that were really very agitated, and we really didn't know what to do. But since we liked music, so we brought some, in those days there were vinyl records, and we started to play that, and suddenly the whole ward quieted down. Incidentally, for those that monitor development in psychopharmacology, this was equivalent to the effect of chlorpromazine in the Saint Anne Hospital in Paris, when Laborie and his colleagues, psychiatrists in that hospital, introduced for the first time in 50s psychopharmacology. Patients really were calmed, and the neighbors started to question, did the hospital move? Well, let's go now on and say we also, with there is evidence that music has very positive effect on stress. Now, stress is a complex thing. It was described already this evening in many different ways. It's first of all something that affects everyone. Not all stress is bad. It needs to be there. If you go to an exam without stress, you are likely not to fare as well. However, long-term stress can harm our health. We already heard many things. And however, at the same time, we also know that there are ways to manage stress. We are all very impressed by what yoga can do in this case. I'm not I'm a practitioner of yoga. I was practitioner of meditation, which is not the same, but it does have a certain effect that is clearly dumping the stress response. Now, the concept of stress today has changed from the time that Selye developed it in the 50s, just up the. Are you seeing my slides? Something happened on my screen. Okay, in any case, Selye, as you know, developed this concept just uphill from McGill. This is the only thing I want to say from this complex slide, which shows chronic social environmental stress, physiological stressors, major life events, all contributing to physiological response to stress. Of course, always individual differences and behavioral responses as adaptation. Today, Bruce McEwen has come with a different way of looking at this. We still recognize, of course, the function of cortisol is a mediator of stress response, but it is not seen as an isolation or outside of what they now consider is the promotion of adaptation. And with this in mind, it still states the same cortisol is a marker of stress. And I would just show you briefly what music does to this marker. There are a limited number of reliable investigations. In other words, I'm talking about markers of stress response. And therefore, this is still work in progress. I'll show you one result, which is by a group in Montreal, in which music, this is the stress, and that's the stress response, cortisol, salivary cortisol, and with the music, this response is dampened. There are many variations and there are many things. There are also many confounding factors which make this type of studies difficult. And of course, this is all an acute stress. So what is happening in the brain that could help us interpret what is music doing? I would say that most important message is that music processing is very modular, and this is part of what Fodor many years ago talked about the brain as being a modular structure. I'm not going to go into details, just to say that we are confronted with a very complex issues. Now, I think this is where I would like to stop by saying one thing. If music is therapy, it is not clearly what you normally associate with the therapeutic intervention through some magic bullet mechanism. What we recognize is that music effect is to establish balance. I call this music as mental hygiene, and I believe this is the spot at which yoga and music could easily meet. And I would like to finish with this by just quoting that music is often an unrecognized resource of social agency and a medium of social order and practice. Musical activities can be seen as a kind of immunogen behavior and so forth. We all recognize that music is applied often as a self-therapy. People that have anxiety, people that, I didn't go into this whole talk, but people that are stressed often self-medicate by listening to the appropriate music. And for every person, different type of music is appropriate music. So thank you very much for your attention. I would also like to say that one of the big things we have in our society is that music is harder and harder to learn, or shall we say, go through the education. Music needs to be just like language. We have to be exposed to the music in order to fully appreciate, although that's not absolutely necessary. So we are fighting now that in every school where there is no budget, first thing that goes is music. But you see, kids love music, and that's it. No, that's not it. This is, I'm inviting you to our next concert when COVID leaves us in peace. This is one of our last concerts before the COVID.
Thank you, Ante,
Thank
for
you.
that beautiful introduction to music. And you raised some important questions, whether this is pre-wired or cultural. And then unlike music, yoga can be practiced yoga can be learned very easily. So although we are also fighting to get yoga introduced in the schools, if not for learning, but to have a good lifestyle. And just a small correction, if you may allow, yoga actually is an eightfold path, starting from what Dr. Rama mentioned, the social prescription, the moral prescripts, which are called the yama niyamas, and then it goes down to asana pranayama, which is basically physical postures and breathing techniques. And then the last three stages of yoga, Ante, is actually meditation. So meditation is actually the culmination of yoga, which pretty much orients us towards mind-body connect. So meditation is essentially part of yoga, and this is also for the information of the viewers which have joined us from around the world from different disciplines. So thank you once again for a lovely talk. I did not plan it, but may I ask if there is a violin around you can play a 30-second music?
I already did my 3 hours today, so I'm
okay.
All right. I want to add something here. Yes, I didn't want to give an impression that well, I did meditation.
May I request Anjali to bring in the panel on the screen as well, so we can interact for 5-6 minutes? Yeah, go ahead, Ante. Ante, you can go ahead.
I think I mentioned once before that I'm also a member of a group at McGill that is called Whole Person Care. And this Whole Person Care has one very intense program by one of my colleagues of mindfulness. And that, of course, is in part what she picked up, if I may say it so, when she spent a few years in India studying tradition of Indian meditation and mindfulness. I'm trying to say that we cannot have whole person care without music, because a person could be complete only if it has music in its, shall we say, repertoire of life, or whatever you want to call it. Just like what you clearly demonstrated, that yoga should really be considered as I call music a mental hygiene. How would you like to call yoga another mental hygiene? I think it's more than mental, because it's also physical and all sorts of other things. Although, as you know, practicing an instrument 6 hours a day, it gives you a good run for your money in terms of physical participation.
And so is the case with the yoga practitioners. I'm sure Dr. Gangadhar will vouch to that. His faculty does and practices and trains people on yoga. And he mentioned, if you remember, the connectivity, the oxytocin, the molecular driver of connectivity, which I believe is one of the primary reason or cause for mental hygiene. Dr. Gangadhar, you want to make any comment to Dr. Rama Rao's talk, or Dr. Ante, or any of the listed questions which have come up from across the world?
Oh, no. There has been a good amount of work that has gone on at NIMHANS on the neuroscience of yoga, neuroscience of music. Perhaps Dr. Ante may want to connect to it. I will link up later on, like just as much as I did for Dr. Sriram's interest in dementia. Music neuroscience is some big activity at NIMHANS.
Well,
yeah, please go ahead, Ante.
Well, music in the past used to be domain of musicians, musicologists, perhaps historians, and some other sociologists. But today, after we managed to see what's going on in our brain, in the live brain, and see how and what happens during the perception of music, during the composition. Do you know who Sting is? A very famous composer who was friend with one of my colleagues, Daniel Levitin, who wrote a number of books. One of them was Your Brain on Music, very popular music story. Well, he took Sting to put him in MRI machine and measured what is happening in his brain when he was creating a song. I could only tell you there is no reverse engineering from this MRI, which would allow anybody else to do creative work, but certainly we have some idea.
And also, Ante, you mentioned the salivary cortisol levels, and Dr.
Yes.
Gangadhar mentioned about the BDNF levels, the oxytocin levels, and also cortisol levels. Wonder, I haven't looked at the music literature on PubMed, which is a Google kind of a search engine for scientists, as all of you know, for music and cortisol and music and BDNF. I'm sure there are studies, but those could be common underlying molecular mechanism which might unify music and yoga. But let me go to Dr. Ramarao to address the question of music actually being a part and parcel of yoga when we think of Om. And my second part, I'm sorry to put this through. Can you make us practice Brahmari, where there is a music in yoga, and Ante and others can enjoy that? What do you think? Thanks. Over to you.
You want to have Brahmari, or you want to have some other form of pranayama?
Wherever the music is there as a part of breathing technique or yoga. And I think I could think of Brahmari because you make a vibration sound. There's a Om there. I think it's part of music. Or you can think of something else. Over to you. It's your call.
Okay. Maybe we'll first address this. So with regard to music, so what happens is, especially in the case of people with dementias, there is what we call, one of the ways to improve on that is neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is a term which we use in the neuroscientist field, where we talk about the brain as being malleable. And so what happens is, each time there's a complex learning process that happens in the brain, there's an increased synaptic activity, there's improved neuronal connections. And what happens is, especially in the hippocampal area, this actually further strengthens the memory areas. And so in our setting, and this is based on evidence-based studies, we encourage people to do all kinds of learning, complex activities that will stimulate this neuroplastic response. And one of the things we encourage them to do is to either take up dancing or take up music, because both dancing and music involves complex network of activity in the brain. Especially with music, you have to learn the compositions, you have to create new compositions, you have to learn the instruments, you have to make sure that the style, the rhythm is all in unison. And all this requires for the brain to be conjuring up new synaptic connections. And so, and of course, there's a lot of evidence-based studies to support this.
Allow me to interrupt. Allow me to interrupt because we've just got 5 minutes left. They have next program lined up. Can we quickly, for what you said, dance and music can help in rewiring and plasticity. So there's a question related to that. Someone asking if you would like to suggest yoga for dementia. Very quickly, I'll just take a fire of questions to each of you.
There's a lot of studies to show yoga helpful for dementia, especially for people with early stage dementias. In fact, in our setting in Apollo Health, we do encourage our patients to be doing yoga. We put them on a 1 hour yoga practice. that involves a lot of balance poses, so it will improve cerebral blood flow. And it also, we tell them to do certain balance other poses that will strengthen their lungs and their brain activities as well. Absolutely, there's a lot of studies to support that those yogas and dementia.
So there's a question: what is the effect of Kumbhak pranayama on aging? So Kumbhak is essentially when you hold your breath and put your tummy inside, and also close all the three passages: the oral,
So when we talk about pranayama, we have three aspects: the Puraka, Kumbhaka, and Ruchaka. Kumbhaka is a stage where you actually hold the breath. So there are two parts to holding the breath. One is between the inhalation and exhalations, and one is after you finish the exhalation. That's a time when there's diffusion of gases, and the oxygen capacity or the PO2 levels increases during the Kumbhaka stage. And that's the stage where people actually experience what we call the actual bliss stage. When you talk about bliss state, that's a time. So Kumbhaka is a very integral part of the entire process of pranayama.
But what Dr. Ghosh is asking is if it has any implications for aging also, any documented evidence or by experience?
Well, the thing is, and Dr. Gangadhar can talk about this. The thing is, nobody does. When we do studies on pranayama, we don't isolate one part of pranayama like Kumbhaka or Rechaka or Puraka and then study it. We have to bring in all three aspects together. So we bring in both inhalation, hold, exhalation, hold, and then we study these people for half an hour or 1 hour. So whatever beneficial effects we see, it's from this entire, the entire backdrop of.
So Dr. Ghosh, as I mentioned, as I replied to Dr. Ante also, just like meditation is not dissociated with yoga, so is the Kumbhak and the other breathing technique not associated with Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Dhyana, Samadhi. So it has an integrated thing, and now we are coming up with new protocols, and particularly led by this university, SVASA. Brought out the diabetic yoga protocol, the common yoga protocol, and they're now coming with COVID-19 protocol. So these all protocols include all aspects. It's an integrated thing, including physical postures, the breathing techniques, and the meditative aspect. So the next question is, any of you can take this, of the effect of yoga on hippocampus. Or one particular question is, there's a loss of family by someone, and how to deal with that by using yogic techniques. Dr. Gangadhar.
Yeah, yoga as practiced with respect to yogasana and pranayama together. There are some interesting yoga postures which are very simple. You could do it without much of difficulty. But nonetheless, many yoga techniques have to be taught by somebody who is at least familiar, if not for several months and years together, at least for a couple of hours of session, learning some of these very simple practices, particularly referring to bending backwards, taking deep breath. Three components which are very important, that he is doing these postures mindfully. Every movement that goes into making a posture, the individual applies a mindful attention to the process, experiences what are all that he is getting out of this, and pay attention to those experiences, and also synchronize the breathing in, out, or holding, depending upon the movement that is leading to a posture. So if people can focus on these things and learn maybe just about half a dozen yoga practices, some of these minor and major ailments can come under control.
Thank you, Dr. Gangadhar. Dr. Ramarao, you want to address the question of a person who probably had a family loss very briefly? It cannot be very easy to answer, but any particular thing he or she should do?
So my suggestion would be, both yoga and pranayama can be a little on the activity side. Instead of that, I would tell the person to do meditation practice. Meditation is extremely helpful. It actually calms the person, it calms the mind, and it has the same benefits as yoga and pranayama. It triggers the same kind of biochemical signals, the same neurochemical pathways. At the same time, it's not a very active process, so you don't have to worry about breathing or breathing hard or breathing fast, and it really calms a person down, and it allows us to take actions in future. So it brings down the cloudiness in the mind, and it opens up the mind in order for us to achieve our task, in order to think about what should be the next thing that we should be doing.
Thank you, Dr. Rama. We have overshot our time. Ante, you want to have a last call on general comment or something?
All I want to say that music contributes to longevity. There are studies that show that musicians live longer, particularly conductors, possibly because music, and possibly because they really exercise, if you know what it means conducting, particularly some. The other thing is a very important thing, that music indeed is practicing music. For example, instrumentalists change their brain structure. You see the motor area is really enlarged. We know that from other studies which show that, for example, taxi drivers in London, this is one of the hardest exams there is, their brain structure is quite changed. And in other words, we see that brain is plastic. And that's what really is what we have to take.
So whether you use music or yoga or any activity or new language should help. Finally,
use it or lose it. Use it or lose it. That's the
wonderful, beautifully said. Dr. Rama Rao, just half a minute. Can you make us practice something, and then we call off?
Okay, let's take
half a minute at most.
Half a minute. Okay, we'll take one breathing and one breather out. It's called Anulom Vilom. Okay, so just take a comfortable position. And we always breathe in through the left nostril, and we'll breathe out to the right nostril, and then we'll alternate. So take a comfortable position, take your right hand, and with your right thumb, close your right nostril, and breathe in through the left nostril for a count of 4. Om 1, Om 2, Om 3, Om 4. And now close your left nostril with your middle and index fingers, and hold for a count of 4. Om 1, Om 2, Om 3, Om 4. And now release the right nostril from your thumb and breathe out to the right nostril for a count of 4. Om 1, Om 2, Om 3, Om 4. And now continue to close the left nostril, breathe in through your right nostril for a count of 4. Om 1, Om 2, Om 3, Om 4. Close your right nostril, hold it for a count of 4. Om 1, Om 2, Om 3, Om 4. And now release the grip on your left nostril and breathe out to the left for a count of 4. Om 1, Om 2, Om 3, Om 4. And now release the grip on the right and breathe normally, keeping your eyes closed. And each round is, that is one round. If you practice about 8 to 9 rounds every day, you'll have less of biological aging, and you look much younger.
Thank you.
You have
very
good
much.
health span.
Thank you. Thank you,
Rao,
Dr. Rao.
from California.
Even I learned something today.
Yes,
well,
thank
I learned
you,
a lot.
Thank you.
Did.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much.
And I would like to thank Dr. Indranil Basu, who started the AOIM thing and the American Academy of Yoga Meditation at PGI. We are now setting up this Center for Mind-Body Medicine. We will be developing protocols, creating awareness. Please join us on the 21st June, the same time, about 7:30 or 8 in the morning, when our director, Dr. Jagat Ram, will announce the invited guest going to be one of the yoga masters. It will be live. I'll share the links with you. Thank you very much. Namaste, and have a great day or good night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Shruti, thank you.
Anjali.
Where is Anjali?
Anjali, she will be
She's
here.
asleep. Okay.
She's there. She'll be here.
She's there. All right. Just want to thank her.
It was such an interesting, informative, just a very thought-provoking session today. So today, actually, we got an opportunity to understand, learn, hear from experts of neuroscience and psychiatry that how the yoga, all the 8 steps of yoga actually helps to not only reduce the stress, but is changing something at the brain level, which is helping to reverse the aging, or at least slow down the aging. And that was really amazing to learn it from the experts and researchers from medical field. I love the concept of music or lose it. So music can be really a self-therapy, so that's natural. So yoga and music go together. As we all know that we have all these pranayam, om chanting things. So really thank you so much for everyone. I thank you all the speakers, Dr. Gangadhar, Dr. Bala, Dr. Pajjan, Dr. Ram Mohan Rao. And thank you, Dr. Akshay Anand, for being such an amazing moderator. Thank you to all our viewers for joining us.
next time
Thank
in
you.
Canada. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Sure. I also thank my tech team, Anjali ji, Siddharth ji, Chaitanya ji, everyone working behind the scenes for this webinar. Stay tuned for our next session, Yoga and Technology, which is already live broadcast on Facebook and YouTube of AAYM channels. Thank you. Namaste.